The real reason clients do trust you. If clients keep telling you, "Sounds interesting, let me think about it," there's a good chance they are not thinking about your product. They are thinking about your risk. And right now in their mind, you are part of that risk. That's the part most people miss. They think trust is about being likable, or charismatic, or confident, or polished. So they improve the deck, clean up the website, memorize better lines, learn objection handling, and try to sound more certain. But in real buying situations, especially serious ones, where money, reputation, team performance, or career risk are involved, that approach often makes things worse. Because trust is not built when you sound impressive. Trust is built when the other person can predict you. That is the real issue. A client usually does not distrust you because your product is terrible. Sometimes the product is weak, of course. Bad offers exist, bad operators exist, but that is not the whole story. A lot of good offers lose deals because the person selling them does not feel legible. They do not feel steady. They do not feel precise. They do not feel like someone a rational adult can safely attach consequences to. And that's what a purchase is. A purchase is not just a transaction. It is an act of transferred consequence. The moment someone buys from you, they are not only buying features. They are buying a future that now includes your judgment, your consistency, your follow-through, your honesty under pressure, and your behavior when things are not smooth. That's why trust matters so much more than presentation. Most people misunderstand this at a very basic level. They think the client is asking, "Do I like this person?" No, the client is asking, often silently, "If I put budget, time, reputation, and internal political capital behind this person, what happens next? Will they still make sense when implementation gets messy? Will they tell me the truth when the answer is inconvenient? Do they understand my actual reality, or are they just running a script?" That's the real evaluation, so here's the core point. Clients don't trust you when your behavior increases uncertainty. They trust you when your behavior makes the future easier to see. That is the whole game. And once you understand that, a lot of things become clear. You understand why some highly knowledgeable people still lose deals. You understand why some confident sellers feel off. You understand why rapport can open a conversation but still fail to close a serious decision. And you understand why the most credible people are usually not the loudest. They are the clearest. Let's go one layer deeper. From a neuroscience point of view, trust is not magic. It is not just emotion. It is not some soft, abstract social vibe. Trust is a prediction problem. The human brain is constantly trying to reduce uncertainty. Every decision is a forecast. Every forecast carries possible loss, and loss gets processed with much more urgency than gain. That's basic survival architecture. When a client considers buying from you, their brain is doing two things at the same time. First, the emotional threat system, especially the amygdala, is scanning for danger, not tiger danger, decision danger, waste of money, embarrassment, implementation pain, hidden effort, broken promises, regret. Second, the prefrontal cortex is trying to simulate the future. It wants a coherent model. It wants to know what happens after the contract, after the meeting, after the enthusiasm fades. It is trying to build a mental movie of cause and effect. Now think about what most sellers do. They use vague language. They move too fast. They answer questions the client didn't ask. They flood the conversation with claims. They hide constraints. They act more certain than the situation deserves. They push urgency before clarity. That creates a problem. If the client cannot build a clear mental model of what working with you will actually feel like, the brain defaults to caution. Not because the product is bad, but because the future is blurry. And blurry equals risky. This is also why confused people rarely say, "I'm confused." They say, "Let me think about it." That sentence is often not an objection. It's a diagnosis. It means, My brain cannot comfortably simulate the next stage, so I'm delaying commitment. This is where a lot of sales training goes wrong. It treats hesitation as resistance to be overcome, but many times, hesitation is just unresolved uncertainty, and unresolved uncertainty is not solved by pressure, it is solved by structure. There's another layer here: attention. A client's brain is not listening to everything you say, it is filtering heavily. The reticular activating system, think of it as the brain's relevance filter, is constantly deciding what matters and what doesn't. That filter is tuned by goals, fear, identity, and immediate pressure. So if your pitch is generic, your message gets filtered out. If you say, "We help teams optimize performance and unlock growth," that sounds polished, but it gives the brain almost nothing to work with. It creates no concrete image, no decision handles, no operational meaning. But if you say, "Your reps are losing momentum after the first objection because managers only review calls after deals are already dead," that means coaching is happening too late, and the team is practicing mistakes instead of correcting them. Now the client's attention locks in. Why? Because you're describing a mechanism, not a slogan. You're giving the brain something it can verify against reality. That matters. People trust specific perception more than generic confidence. That's why borrowed language is dangerous. You can memorize the perfect talk track, but if it isn't connected to real judgment, it will sound efficient and dead at the same time. The market can often feel the difference between a person who is repeating and a person who is seeing. This is where Naval's idea of specific knowledge becomes incredibly useful. Specific knowledge is knowledge that is earned through direct contact with reality. It's not just information, it's pattern recognition. It's judgment that comes from actually doing the work, seeing the edge cases, understanding the failure modes, and knowing what matters and what does not. Clients trust that. They may not use those words, but they respond to it immediately. Because specific knowledge changes how you speak, it makes you more precise, more selective, less theatrical, less eager to sound smart, more willing to say, "This will work if these three conditions are true." If they're not, it probably won't. And that last sentence is one of the strongest trust builders in business, not because it sounds nice, because it lowers ambiguity. It tells the client, "This person is not trying to trap me. This person is helping me judge reality." That is what high-level selling actually is. Not manipulation, not emotional coercion, not verbal performance. At its best, selling is the disciplined reduction of decision friction. You help another human being see clearly enough to make a good decision with less unnecessary uncertainty. Sometimes that decision is yes, sometimes it should be no. And the moment your client feels that you are capable of either answer, your credibility rises. Now let's bring in Charlie Munger, because his inversion principle is brutally useful here. Instead of asking, "How do I make clients trust me?" ask the inverse question: what makes a smart client regret trusting someone? Usually it is not lack of enthusiasm. It's these things. The seller talked before understanding. The seller used abstract language. The seller hid trade-offs. The seller acted certain where the situation was uncertain. The seller optimized for the close, not for the fit. The seller disappeared after the agreement. The seller's incentives felt stronger than their integrity. That's the list. And once you see it, trust becomes less mysterious. You don't need to be more magnetic. You need to remove the reasons a rational person would hesitate to rely on you. Munger also talked a lot about psychology and misjudgment. That matters here too. Buyers are not purely rational. They are influenced by liking, social proof, authority, scarcity, consistency, pressure. All of that is real, but serious buyers know this too. They have been marketed to, they have been pitched. They have watched polished people overpromise and disappear. So when stakes are high, they start discounting surface-level persuasion. A good logo helps. A nice suit helps. A clean demo helps. A testimonial helps. But none of these can replace one thing: calibrated honesty. That is rare enough to be a competitive advantage. And here's the uncomfortable part. A lot of sellers lose trust not because they lack knowledge, but because they need the deal too much. Clients can feel that, not mystically, behaviorally. Your nervous system leaks into your communication. If you are attached to the outcome, you interrupt more, you explain too early, you defend too fast, you avoid hard truths. You overreact to hesitation. You hear interest where there is only politeness. You rush toward the close because your brain is trying to relieve its own anxiety. What some people call energy, or even attraction, often has a much simpler explanation. State changes perception. When your emotional state is unstable, your attention narrows. You stop seeing accurately. You stop listening for truth. You start hunting for signs that the conversation is going well. That makes you miss what matters. So real confidence is not, "I feel powerful." Real confidence is, "I do not need this conversation to save me." That changes everything. When you don't need the meeting to validate you, you can actually observe. You can ask better questions. You can tolerate silence. You can admit uncertainty. You can tell the client, "I don't think this is the right fit yet," without collapsing internally. And paradoxically, that makes people trust you more. Because now your behavior is not organized around self-protection. It is organized around reality. This also connects to creativity and flow. A lot of people think creativity is something that arrives when you feel inspired. In reality, in high-stakes communication, creativity often dies when self-consciousness goes up. If you're spending your mental bandwidth trying to sound impressive, your working memory is occupied. That means less capacity to listen, diagnose, and respond intelligently. That's why some people become worse in important meetings than in casual conversation. They are not less knowledgeable, they are more self-monitored. Flow doesn't come from waiting for the right feeling. It often comes from entering the task with enough structure and discipline that the mind can stop performing and start engaging. In sales, that means this. Don't enter a call trying to be persuasive. Enter trying to understand so precisely that the next right sentence becomes obvious. That is a very different operating system, and it produces a very different kind of trust. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a sales director at a mid-sized company is considering an AI-based training system for their sales team. Not a toy, not a casual purchase, a real operational decision. If they buy the wrong thing, they don't just lose money. They lose time, manager attention, implementation energy, and internal credibility. Now imagine vendor A shows up excited. They lead with features, AI coaching, intelligent analysis, deal review, talk track feedback, dashboard visibility, performance optimization. They say they help teams scale coaching and drive conversion. Nothing they said is false, but the sales director still doesn't trust them. Why? Because none of that proves they understand the actual problem. So the director asks, how long does it usually take to see adoption? Vendor A says, it depends, but teams usually start seeing value quickly. That sounds fine. It also says almost nothing. Then the director asks, what if managers aren't consistently reviewing rep activity today? Vendor A says, our platform helps solve that. Again, maybe true, still weak. What is happening in the buyer's brain? The buyer is trying to simulate workload, failure risk, and behavioral adoption. They want to know if this tool fits the real operating conditions of their team. But vendor A is still speaking at the level of optimism. So the buyer feels more uncertainty, not less. Now imagine vendor B opens differently. They say, before I show you anything, can I understand 3 things? How reps are currently coached, where deals usually stall, and who actually owns behavior change after training. Already the conversation feels different. Then they ask, How many reps consistently review lost calls? What does a manager actually do when a rep underperforms for 2 weeks? Where in the pipeline do deals start slipping? Discovery, follow-up, or late-stage objection handling? If I asked your reps what good discovery sounds like, would they give the same answer? What has the team already tried that looked promising but didn't stick? So now they are diagnosing. Then, after listening, vendor B says something even more important. If managers won't spend even one structured session a week reinforcing what the reps are learning, you probably shouldn't buy this yet. The tool can accelerate coaching, but it won't replace absent coaching discipline. That sentence may cost them some deals. It will also win the right ones, because now the buyer thinks, this person is not trying to trap me in a software subscription. This person understands implementation reality. This person can say no. This person is safer. That is trust, not smoothness. Charm, pressure, performance, safety through clarity. And notice what happened there. Bottom layer science. The buyer's threat response goes down because the future becomes more legible. Mindset layer. The seller is playing a long-term, high accountability game, not a short-term extraction game. Capability layer. They are using deliberate diagnosis, precise language, and calibrated honesty. Action layer. They are structuring the decision around fit, adoption, and next step reality. That's what integrated selling looks like. Now let's make this even more uncomfortable. Sometimes clients don't trust you because you are not actually disciplined enough yet. Not morally bad, just undisciplined. You say you care about trust, but you show up late. You say you are strategic, but you improvise every call. You say your solution is proven, but your examples are vague. You say you understand clients, but you don't document patterns. You say you want premium buyers, but your communication still sounds like low-end marketing. Trust is not built by claiming depth. It is built by displaying organized thought over time. In other words, reliability is visible. This matters especially if you're selling expertise, software, consulting, leadership, or yourself. In those fields, the product is partly inseparable from the person. You are not only selling an output. You are selling how you think, how you decide, how you communicate, and how you behave under ambiguity. That means personal credibility is not branding decoration. It is part of the offer. If your mind is chaotic, your client feels it. If your incentives are hidden, your client feels it. If your understanding is shallow, your client feels it. If your language is borrowed, your client feels it. Maybe not consciously, but enough to hesitate. So the question becomes, how do you train trustworthiness as a practical skill? This is where deliberate practice matters. You don't improve trust by vaguely trying to be more authentic. That's too soft. Too ambiguous. You need trainable components. Start with diagnosis. Before your next important conversation, don't ask, how do I pitch this? Ask, what risk is this person carrying? What would make saying yes dangerous for them? What has probably been tried before? What future are they trying to protect? What would make them regret trusting someone in my position? Those questions force you into the client's frame. Then train precision. Every vague phrase you use should be suspicious to you. Better results. Better how? Save time. Whose time? How much? In which workflow? Improve trust. Through what behavior? At what stage? More growth. From what mechanism? Vagueness sounds professional until money is involved. Then it sounds evasive. Next, train calibrated certainty. This is huge. Weak sellers sound unsure about everything. Bad sellers sound sure about everything. Trusted sellers are precise about what they know, what they infer, and what they still need to verify. That calibration is credibility. You can literally practice sentences like, based on what you described, I'm confident this can help in these 2 areas. The part I would want to verify before making a recommendation is adoption behavior from managers. I think the issue is not lack of training content. It's failure of reinforcement. If that diagnosis is wrong, the solution changes. That kind of language does not weaken your authority, it sharpens it. Then train evidence selection. Don't throw random proof at people. Use evidence that matches the exact kind of risk they care about. If the buyer fears implementation failure, don't send them a vanity testimonial. Show them the onboarding path, the adoption milestones, the points where projects usually fail, and how you manage that failure risk. If they fear political embarrassment, show them how another decision maker introduced the solution internally and what metrics made the decision defensible. If they fear wasted time, show them the operational lift required, not just the upside. Evidence works when it reduces a specific uncertainty. Then train follow-through. A trust-building meeting can be destroyed by sloppy aftercare. If you end a strong call and then send a generic follow-up 2 days late, you have just taught the client something about your operating standard. Every interaction is evidence. A good follow-up note should do 4 things. It should restate the client's situation in their language. It should summarize the decision criteria. It should acknowledge the real risks. And it should define the next step with owner and timing. That is not admin. That is trust architecture. If you want a weekly practice system, make it brutally simple. Take 1 conversation per day or at least 3 per week. Record it if allowed or reconstruct it immediately after. Then review it with 5 questions. Did I understand the client's real problem, or did I project one? Where did I speak in abstractions instead of mechanisms? Where did I try to relieve my own anxiety instead of increase their clarity? Did I name at least one honest constraint or disqualifier? Did the next step become clearer by the end of the conversation? Score yourself honestly. This is where AI can be extremely useful, by the way. Not to replace judgment, but to accelerate feedback. Use it to analyze transcripts, identify vague language, detect over-talking, highlight missed questions, and compare what you said against what the buyer actually needed. That's a modern leverage point, not technology for its own sake, technology in service of disciplined improvement. And if you have a specific strength, push it properly. If you're highly technical, don't hide behind product detail. Learn translation. Make complexity understandable without diluting truth. If you're naturally relational, don't hide behind warmth. Learn diagnosis. Learn to tie trust to outcomes, economics, and implementation. In skill building, your strongest edge is where you can become exceptional, but your biggest weaknesses still create drag. A strong engine doesn't matter if one wheel is missing. Now let me add one boundary here, because this point gets misunderstood. Trustworthiness does not mean oversharing. It does not mean being passive. It does not mean never persuading. And it definitely does not mean acting small. You still need standards. You still need clear recommendations. You still need to guide decisions. But there's a difference between guidance and pressure. Pressure says, trust me because I need you to decide. Guidance says, here is how to think about this clearly, including reasons not to move forward. One is self-serving urgency. The other is mature leadership. Clients can feel the difference, and this matters beyond selling products. It matters in interviews. It matters in freelancing. It matters in leadership. It matters in partnerships. It matters if you are trying to build a reputation online. If you want people to trust your ideas, don't just express opinions. Show your reasoning, show your trade-offs, show where your view applies and where it breaks. Unexpressed knowledge has no market value, but poorly structured expression has low trust value. So yes, you need to put your thinking into the world. But if you want serious people to respond, stop thinking like an attention seeker and start thinking like a reliable operator. That's a different standard. So here's what I'd recommend you do next. Today, write down your last 5 stalled deals, missed opportunities, or conversations that felt promising but went nowhere. For each one, answer this honestly. Did they doubt the value? Did they doubt the fit? Did they doubt the timing? Or did they doubt me, not your intentions, your credibility? Then look for the moment trust likely dropped. Was it when you rushed, when you got vague, when you dodged a hard question? When you sounded too polished and not specific enough? Tomorrow, before your next meaningful conversation, spend 10 minutes preparing a trust brief. 1 page only. Write, what is this person likely afraid of? What would make this decision costly for them? What assumptions am I tempted to make too early? What would an honest, not a fit, condition look like here? What concrete questions do I need answered before I should recommend anything? Then in the actual conversation, hold yourself to 3 rules. First, do not explain the solution until you can describe their problem in a way they agree with. Second, say at least one thing that proves you are willing to protect them from a bad decision, even if it reduces your short-term chance of closing. Third, end with operational clarity. Who does what next, by when, and based on what criteria? Then this week, review your language. Replace every abstract phrase in your pitch, proposal, website, or content with something concrete. Use mechanisms, examples, time frames, and conditions. Make your thinking visible, and before every important meeting, use a 2-minute reset. Breathe, slow down your body, then remind yourself, my job is not to be liked. My job is not to force momentum. My job is to make the decision clearer. That one sentence can change your communication immediately, because when clarity becomes your target, trust starts to become a byproduct. And that is the point. The market does not reward people who merely want to be trusted. It rewards people who become safer to trust. So if clients don't trust you, don't start by asking how to sound more convincing. Ask a harder question. What in my behavior makes the future harder to see? Fix that and everything changes. Because in the end, people don't trust you because your pitch is smooth. They trust you when it becomes obvious that you would rather tell the truth than win the meeting. And that is rare enough to build a career on. If you've lost a deal, a client, or an opportunity recently, what do you think they actually distrusted? The offer, the timing, or your predictability?